Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I know we're going to have a bunch more people log in here in a minute. So welcome everyone to this July management and leadership training. We're excited to be here again with all of you. Hope you're all having a enjoyable summer, staying out of the heat. I hope you've been able to do some fun things or have some fun things planned. I know over just this 4th of July weekend, I was pretty proud of myself. My wife and I, she'd never hiked Timpanogos, clear up to the shack. I haven't done it for over 20 years. So it's for those of you who are unfamiliar with the hike, it's a round trip of 15 miles with an elevation gain of about 4,200 feet. We made it, we survived, we did it, we had a great time. It's an entirely different planet up there on top of the mountain, but absolutely beautiful. But I'm just now starting to feel normal again in my movements and being able to get around. So that was kind of rough, but just one of the things that my wife and I were able to do. For those of you who are joining today for the first time, welcome. We invite you to participate in this discussion today. But as a reminder, please make sure that your microphones are on mute unless you have a comment. That just helps us to be able to focus on the discussion and what we're doing. To kind of help get the brain juices flowing here, I wanted to just have a brief discussion real quick on some thoughts I've had recently in regards to leadership and the topic of character. Personally, I'm fascinated by character and how it affects people and cultures and what it is. And Stephen R. Covey, he part of his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks much about character and says that character is the root of effectiveness. He says, like the top of a tree, our personality is what people see first. Although image, technique, and skills can influence our success, the real source of lasting effectiveness lies in strong character, which is the roots. So again, he's saying that hypothetically looking at a tree, our personality is what we see, the visual part of what we see. The tree, the leaves, the branches are all the fruit of what lies beneath the surface, what we don't see, which is our character. And he says that our first energies should go towards our own character development, which is often invisible to others, like the roots that sustain great trees. He says, as we cultivate the roots, we will begin to see the fruits. So, in essence, effective leadership isn't just about leading and understanding others, okay? It's also very much about self-awareness and our understanding our own desired direction. So I want to ask a question real quick to the group. Why do you think self-awareness is a valuable component of leadership? What are your thoughts? Why is it important that I understand myself to be an effective leader?
Jason, that makes me think of my favorite show, The Office, and how totally unaware of himself the leader was. So, and how awkward, the most awkward moments ever can occur if you don't understand and are completely aware of yourself.
Perfect. Thank you, Gina.
Or Michael.
Yes, that's a great example. So I guess that leads to my next question is how do you as a supervisor, as a leader, how do you become self-aware? Or in other words, how do you initiate self-awareness without someone having to call you out on something? How do we do that? How do you do that? How do we keep from locking ourselves in our own little bubbles? You know, my daughters, I have twin daughters that'll be 15 here in a few weeks, and I'm always teasing them because they have a infatuation with One Direction, aka Harry Styles. And I always tell them, I said, the first step is admitting you have a problem. So how do we as leaders, how do we admit to ourselves that maybe we have a problem? How do we become self-aware?
Jason,
Yes.
For myself, I when I'm trying to be self-aware, I think it starts by trying to understand other people and how they perceive what I'm doing, and kind of like empathize a little bit with others in order to see myself from, I guess, another point of view, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. You know, one of my favorite quotes, it says that character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Um, and a lot of times in my affiliations or associations with other people, I have to stop and, in a sense, step out of my mental bubble and ask myself, how am I treating these people? You know, when we have a superior or manager above us, you know, oftentimes we, for lack of a better term, we kind of put on a show a little bit. We, you know, we want to impress our boss. Um, but how do we treat people that can do nothing for us? I think is a good way, you know, like Mike said, to understand the perspectives of others can then affect our own self-awareness. Thanks, Mike. Anything else that comes to mind? How you step out of your own little me bubble?
I would answer, but everyone's welcome in my bubble.
Tina doesn't have a bubble. It's the world is her bubble.
Well, and Gina, I think you definitely have the character that supports that. And I admire that very much about you, Gina. You know, people know that you're genuine and that you honestly care about them. And I think you can definitely see, as Covey's example here of a tree, the fruit of your character. Um, so you definitely have a very vibrant tree going on over there in your life. So hats off to you, Gina.
Hey, Jason.
Um, yeah,
Randy said, I think it's helpful to go to those you work with and ask for honest feedback. Sometimes by soliciting the feedback, the leader can provide an environment where others feel comfortable enough to share their feelings.
okay, and that's you know, that can be a challenge because you have to create that culture, you have to create that environment so that ultimately you can receive that feedback, and that feedback's not always easy. That feedback can be very humbling at times, to help you redirect your course or your desired direction in your job and what you do. Um, so thank you for your comments on that. You know, and we've got a great discussion today. We've got our fire chief, Mark Sanderson. He's somewhat newer to Orem City. We're lucky to have him. He's going to discuss with us today the book, The Culture Code. I'm not going to get into details about the book. I'll let him do that. But Real quickly, we're going to, I'm going to turn the time over to Carrie to cover a few line items, and then after which we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mark. So Carrie, it's all yours now.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Just apologizing up front. They're mowing the lawn right outside my window this morning, so I'll try and talk loud when they come around. But excited to have you guys all here, and all of us that did not take the short week off. Kudos to us for being here today for this really great session that we have scheduled. We'll go over some policy changes and some management things, just so that we can have a quick discussion on that before I turn the time over to Mark. So, like Jason said, I'll go over dates for the market, the merit, the common benefits study. We'll talk about some of the changes that are coming about from that. I've been meeting with most of your work groups already. I have some on the calendar still, but just in case you haven't had the opportunity to have us come in for your work group yet, I'll give you some dates so that you're aware of those, and then we'll turn the time over to the leadership discussion. Real quickly, if you didn't get an opportunity to get the Culture Code book, I do have a few copies left here in my office. So we'll be discussing that today. We'll also be discussing it in August and September. So if you don't have the book yet, swing by and let's get you a copy so that you can help participate in these sessions. So the upcoming sessions that are coming up, August 5th will be our session after this. That's also the Employee Appreciation Lunch Day. So it's going to be a really fun day for us. We'll do this session and then have lunch afterwards. Mark Sanderson will be doing the leadership portion, and he'll be doing part 2 of the Culture Code, Share Vulnerability. And then Heather Schriever is on the docket to talk about agreements. Then September 2nd, we'll do part 3 of the Culture Code, Establish Purpose, and Thane Carter will be talking to us about fleet best practices. So let's go over some compensation dates. We've got a lot going on between merit and market changes. So I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page so that none of your employees are confused as to when is everything happening. So the merit increases went into play June 27th. That will be displayed on your July 15th paycheck. So those merit increases have already been entered into the system. If you are a supervisor that has not let your staff members know what their merit increases are, if you don't mind just giving them that updated information now. We've been getting a lot of phone calls here in HR trying to find out from employees what their merit increases are. So if you don't mind just giving that to them so that they understand what that is. Then we've done the market study with NFP. Those changes will be into place July 25th. So you'll see those changes on your August 12th paycheck. We have gone around, met with a bunch of work groups. We may not have hit your work group yet. So if we haven't, it's on the docket. We'll be there in the next couple of weeks. We will have the city council approve the new compensation structure for full-time city employees. So after Tuesday night, once it's approved, we'll be able to publish the new grades and ranges on Walter so that you can share those with your work groups as well. The market study for flex employees, we've gotten that back, but those changes for flex and seasonal employees won't begin until September 19th. And your flex and seasonal employees will see those updated pays October 7th. Anybody have questions on these dates? Okay. So there was a major policy change that did go into play with this new compensation structure that we're rolling out. If you currently have a differential or someone in your work group does, with the exception of the Spanish speaking incentive, we'll talk about that in a minute, but if you had a differential for a certification or a license that you have for your position, that will be rolled into pay on that July 25th pay period. So if you are getting a differential, maybe for example, Jason Adamson for your ARM, for your risk management certification, that's going to be rolled into your pay. If you were getting the Spanish speaking differential, that will no longer be in your pay. You will be getting a $600 bonus at the end of the year. How you do that is you come in June of 22. You'll test a fluency test with Emma in our HR office to make sure that you are fluent in Spanish. And as long as your department director approves and agrees that you did use your Spanish speaking skills during the previous fiscal year, so the one that just started, you'll get a $600 bonus on your paycheck. So that is the only differential that is not getting rolled into pay. If you are moving into the Public Works Hybrid STEP program that's starting July 25th, if you are getting a differential, that's now rolled into the STEP program, so there won't be an addition to your pay. You'll just be placed into the correct step in the new STEP program. Okay, Mark, I hope you don't mind the picture that I found this online. We've got Chief Sanderson here today to speak to us about the culture code. One thing that I really appreciative of is Mark's been here about a year. He's done some amazing, wonderful, great changes to the fire department and has been a great asset and addition to the city leadership as well. So we're excited for him to share with us how he helps build the culture in his department and what we can do to help our culture in our department and the city as well. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Carrie. And the picture, I hope you all appreciate the picture, because as happy as I am and as often and as fun as we have around the fire station, I feel like I smile a lot. However, in pictures, it's not something that you catch me smiling very often. And so I appreciate, Carrie, you sharing that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to go through this book. Initially, the plan was to cover the entire book, but the more I got into the meat of the details, and culture is what we're going to talk about, I just found that it was too much to tackle in one setting. And so I appreciate, I guess, depending on how the conversation goes today, will depend on section 2 and section 3, and if we want to move forward with that. But I appreciate the comments Jason made early, talking about characteristics and leadership. And what I find the most fascinating is that as leaders, we really drive the direction of culture. And that's kind of our responsibility within our own departments, and especially as exec staff, to set expectations for the culture. Just a brief synopsis of how I came into this book. Working for a different organization, there were lots of culture issues, lots of entitlements, lots of long-term employees that had they were very opinionated. It was just interesting. I had a paramedic provide me this book, just mailed it to me, and I read it. I actually listened to it while I was running, but since I've listened to it several times, I've actually read the book from front to back, and I'd have to say it's probably one of my favorite books. And so I hope that if you haven't got a copy, I know Carrie said she has a few extra. I actually have some in my office as well. Please take the opportunity to read it. It's an easy read, and I think the principles and the examples that are provided, which we'll talk about today, can benefit all of us. Carrie's going to monitor the comments or the hand raisings, but I hope that you feel free just to break in, because I'm going to go through some information and then challenge each one of us with some questions, and I'm hoping for some participation, because really what we're going to talk about from this book is the secrets of highly successful groups. And I feel like that Orem City and each one of our individual divisions should be the best. And so I'm going to jump in right first with the question is, what is culture? And I'm looking for some comments, what you guys feel the word culture means.
So Mark, this is Heather. I think culture to me means a set of shared core values within a particular group, whether it be a division, a department, I mean, if you want to go broader than that. But I think that's what I'd say. Shared values, shared core principles.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Heather, I've made some notes like represents beliefs, behaviors, practices, characteristics, whether that's leadership characteristics that Jason talked about or just organizational characteristics shared by a group. So thank you. Looking at this slide, would you guys say that
Hey,
Orem,
Mark, we can't
Yeah.
see your yet.
can't see it?
No.
Oh my gosh.
But while you're pulling that up, I wanted to, Shirley said establishing norms and behavior. Jason Neely says it is also the existing atmosphere, and Trevor Bell said collective attitudes or customs.
I would also say that it's kind of going along with what the three mentioned in the chat. It's something that's noticeable. Like when you join a new organization or group of people, if they have a strong culture, it's pretty recognizable fast, I think, for good or bad, depending on the culture.
Can you see it now? I'm sorry that I wasn't sharing.
Yeah, no, it's perfect now.
Yeah, so would you guys say that we have a defined culture for the city of Orem? Is it recognizable outside of our individual departments or leaders that you interact with from other agencies or organizations? I think it's a big question, and I've had to actually think about it myself. And do we have a defined culture?
Mark, this is Stephen. I think, one thought I'm having is I think in some areas of the city we do this really well. Others probably not as well. And I'm not even speaking of specifics. I think most organizations you could say that. But the idea of like recognizable or like observed, because I think some people would say we state it really well. Like we say we believe it. We have different things that would show that, but is it recognizable or observed by, like Mike said, like a new employee coming in? I think those are two different distinctions to make it's not just a statement that hangs on a wall. It's something that, again, to go back to your slide here, it's recognizable in the day-to-day living out in the organization.
Yeah, I agree. Our mission statements that I believe we all have within our own departments, they're only words if the members of the organizations don't function and live exactly up to those words, if that makes sense. How about individual departments? Do our individual departments have their own culture that either supports the ideas, the philosophies, the beliefs, the behaviors, the practices of the overarching Orem City defined culture?
Hey, Mark, before we go to just departments, I wanted to say citywide, I think one thing that we are doing now is showing that we're a learning culture with all of these trainings for supervisors and Build a Better Orem too, is that we're trying to show that we are trying to build our next leaders and have succession planning rather than, we're trying to be upstream in our thinking rather than reactive. I think that's one thing that we're doing to our culture right now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Carrie.
Russ put, Orem has long-standing positive culture of always providing exceptional service. For example, all departments work hard to do more with less.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. One other thing that I've recognized, having been here earlier, early 2000s, leaving for several years, coming back, I really feel like we have a culture that's family oriented. I think we all talk about that a lot. And almost to extent of a real family. We treat each other really well. We work really well as inter departments, but then we have those moments that maybe aren't so positive as far as culture, where we actually treat each other like true brothers and sisters, beat the crap out of each other. And I think that's one area as far as developing a culture surrounding the words family that we all can focus on, and just those personal interactions with one another. And so talking, unless there's, are there any other, I mean, is there specific department cultures that anyone wants to share before I move on?
Mark, this is Jamie. I'm from the library. I've been with the library now in varying capacities for like over 25 years. And we have all these sayings in the library about bringing people and information together, trying to get to yes, believing people when their mouths move, that kind of thing when we're dealing with patron interactions and, things. And I can say that from my experience, I've seen the staff put that into play. That those aren't just sayings that we have on a wall or that we share with new employees. When you have a problem, I've been in conversations when I was being supervised by someone who said, now remember, this is our ethos, this is our belief. And so we're going to find a solution that puts that into play for this patron or this situation. So I think definitely we have a very active, recognizable culture in that sense.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mark, I wanted to share about our culture at the senior center, which is probably a whole lot different than most of the other departments within the city. But we liken ourselves to Cheers without the beers, where everyone knows your name and we're always glad you came. And it goes beyond just my staff, but that we recognize every single patron that comes in here. And if we don't know who they are, we do our best to get to know them and make them feel welcome and needed and cared about.
Thanks, Gina. And we could definitely change the culture at the senior center if it was Cheers with beers. I mean, you may have way more participation from city employees showing up at your lunch.
I think it's happy hour, and we're going to start that from 3 to 4.
Oh, that's great. Listen, I want to move on to the importance of culture. And I've made some notes that just besides the intrinsic value, culture provides important social and economic benefits with improved learning and health, increased tolerance, and opportunities to come together with others. Culture enhances our quality of life and increases overall well-being for both individuals and communities. So when it comes to culture, it also provides stability that gives you a feeling of safety and security. A positive culture allows for an employee to share vulnerabilities, which we'll talk about another time, and culture provides for an established purpose. And so what is our purpose?
Mark, coming into risk management, I was asked to figure out the culture of Orem City and what that was. And that was quite the journey, and it still is. And, in your previous question about, individual departments have their own culture. Absolutely. And it's not always it's not a bad thing that it all works together for the bigger collective culture. It's similar to like your extremities. I've got a left arm and a right arm, a left hand and a right hand, and a left foot and a right foot. But it all, we benefit collectively because of the culture that exists in the library, because of the culture that exists at the senior center, because of the culture that exists in our police department, fire department, public works, and development services. Those things is what creates that whole, creates that body of what we are, what we represent to the public, to the city. Every component or every it's important. It creates the bigger whole, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciate the comments. I mean, I can tell you that the purpose of the fire department obviously is when we put out fires, we deliver emergency medical services to the community, provide fire safety aspect through fire prevention, where I've always viewed the fire department as a reactive organization when it comes to culture, that people call 911, we respond, take care of the emergency. And I think within the fire department, especially working with Chief Earl under fire prevention, over fire prevention, there's a shift in our culture that fire prevention is a huge opportunity for us, which will allow us to, it actually will reduce our call volume, reduce our fires, reduce our medical emergencies, these type of things by the work that Russ and Brandon are doing in fire prevention. And so turning our culture from a reactive much more to a proactive approach in reducing the things we love to do. That's one of our goals. I'm going to move on to this. If you've read the book, I hope, and you may have seen this challenge in other aspects. There's so many. When I started researching the spaghetti challenge, there's many variations of it. This was an experiment that was performed within this book, that it's an activity for beginners in design thinking. So the University of Stanford, California, Tokyo, there were several other places that were studied over the course of several months. These were 4-person groups, and the groups were broken into a number of different kindergartners, business students, lawyers, CEOs. The goal is to build the tallest possible structure using the following items. 20 pieces, you guys can read this, 20 pieces of uncooked spaghetti, 1 yard of transparent tape, yard of string, and then 1 standard marshmallow. And there was only one rule. The rule was the marshmallow had to end up on the top. And so out of those 4 groups, who would you place your bet could build the tallest structure? If you read the book, you know the answer. But for those that haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, where are you gonna?
Kindergarten.
Kindergartners.
Heather, I thought you would have said lawyers.
Yeah, no, I'm putting my money on the kindergartners every time.
Well, that's a pretty good bet. But here's one of the things that I'm going to challenge, and I hope that you guys will take this challenge. I think this is really important in a team building exercise, and we'll talk more about this specific spaghetti challenge. Is that I'm hoping that the BCs provided our battalion chiefs with provided spaghetti noodles and tape string and a marshmallow, just pops into the station, our individual stations. There's 12 of them, 4 to 5 guys, 8 guys at station 3, and lays out this challenge, reads it to them, and then gives them 18 minutes. And I'm hoping to see which one of our shifts, which one of our stations build the tallest tower, following the rules, working together. Because I feel like the fire department is a group of guys and gals that work really well together. I mean, we put fires out, we respond on medical emergencies, and we do some really good teamwork. And so just be interesting looking at the groups to then throw firefighters, EMTs into this mix to see if we can do any better. So business students, they took the approach, this is in comparison now, and we'll get to some results, but specifically with the business students, they took the approach of first tossing ideas back and forth. They asked questions to each other. They looked at several different options. It was more of a strategic and professional approach to tackling this assignment or this challenge. They then decided on an approach, divided up the tasks, and started to build. In contrast, the kindergartners, they didn't strategize. They didn't analyze anything or generate any ideas, banter back and forth like we all do in our leadership meetings. They just worked together. They jumped in, grabbed all the materials and started to build their tower. It's interesting that the way they played it is, let's try this. no, put it here. No, let's put that here. And again, the question, who would you bet on? Well, interesting enough, the results showed the kindergartners on average build a structure that was 26 inches tall. And then it breaks down CEOs at 22 inches, lawyers 15 inches. So Heather, your team was better than university students. They only built 10 inches. That's like one spaghetti noodle. And so I can't quite figure out that study, but I think what it boils down to is they plan too much. So one of the questions I asked, and I've been in a number of organizations that spend so much time developing the plan that if they had just gone to work, they would have got it done. And let me give you a specific example. It's called the one bag. And if there's a couple firefighters on that work for Intermountain Healthcare and Fly with Lifelight, when I first went to work with that organization, they were right in the process of building this one bag project. It's basically just combining a pediatric bag with an adult medical emergency bag into one, because you just never know which patient you're going to fly on. Well, 18 months later, after leaving the organization, they still were working on the bag because they had to have it exactly right for them to implement anything. Where if they would have just jumped in, put the bag together, gone to work, tweaked the project over, even if it was several months, I mean, this thing would be perfect and be utilized and be an asset and a resource to them and their patient care for a year prior to still working on it. And I haven't reached out. It's been another year. I'd be curious to see if it was actually in place yet. If they actually had worked through it. So why do certain groups add up to be greater than the sum of their parts while others add up to be less? I mean, have you ever encountered a time in your specific departments where the plan takes longer to complete the project? I shared the example of the one bag, but I know there's examples of we've planned it to death rather than just jump in and fix it.
Mark, this is Jamie again. I don't know that this is necessarily an experience I've had in my department, but I've had it in working with other groups in my life where waiting for everyone's opinion and approval can slow something down. And it's not that you don't care about people's opinions, but there is a point at which I think you just have to get in and start doing. And seek information along the way, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm expressing this very well, but I think sometimes we can want everyone to be on the same page and everyone to be happy with the plan, and that can stall out the plan, if that makes sense. Instead of someone stepping up and saying, we're going to just start. We're going to put this into play. We'll course correct as we move along if we need to, if it's not working. But just being willing to kind of start to move forward as opposed to, yeah, like you said, being stuck in that planning phase.
Yeah, thank you. I made some notes just based on the results and my thoughts, and this challenge and the purpose of this challenge, it's all about the participants. It's about our employees. It's not necessarily about the task itself. But how do we work together? And in trying to really think how kindergartners would be able to outbuild CEOs. Can you just imagine Mr. Davidson in his city manager retreat with a group being outworked by kindergartners? It didn't make any sense to me. But when you really, or any of our groups, you go to a fire chief's organization and the kindergartners certainly would have outbuilt us, which just blows my mind. But when I sit back and think, because we have our fire chiefs, Utah County Fire Chiefs meeting today, this afternoon, how could kindergartners outbuild us? And some of the notes I mean, specifically from the book, and ideas I hope that you guys can add to is kindergartners, they don't have egos. They're not trying to prove their intelligence. They're not trying to be in charge. They're not scared to speak up because they may be wrong. They're not afraid to say no to each other. And they're not trying to adapt to any social norms. I mean, are there any other things that you think hinder our abilities to work together and build, like this picture shows, the world record marshmallow challenge at 65 inches? Why can't our organization, why can't our individual departments work together and, you know, kill the 26-inch kindergartners results? Any thoughts?
Hey, Mark,
Go
as
ahead.
you were talking about that, I was thinking that sometimes we're afraid to move down a path that might be the wrong choice, right? So we've got to vet out everything to death before we make a decision because we don't want to make the wrong choice. And one of my favorite sayings is the road of life is paved with flat squirrels who couldn't make a decision, right? I mean, if we are too afraid to make a decision, then we're making the decision not to move forward.
Yeah, I agree, Carrie. Thank you. I mean, I talk all the time in our leadership meetings that I would rather our leaders or our employees make 100 wrong decisions than not to make one. And I mean, in the last year, to your point, that we've changed a lot of things in the fire department, I've made a lot of mistakes. We've made, I personally, but as a leadership team as well, we've made decisions that in the moment felt right, seemed right. Um, and even a couple of them, I could be more specific, but even the very next day, something changed and it was not the right decision. And we had to walk it back. And so I would challenge everybody to make the decision, move down the path and tweak it. That's kind of how I live my life is make a decision, have to tweak it. Make another decision, have to tweak it versus I'm not good at sitting down, structuring, building the plan out, and then moving forward. I would get nothing done. I just have to start and I have to just tweak life.
Hey, Mark, this is Stephen. One other thought that I think becomes a hindrance as you get older is one, you're afraid to have an idea that looks bad. So you kind of hold back on thoughts, but then you're also afraid to hurt feelings by telling somebody that you don't think their idea is going to work. And so we just get into a lot of I'll use the word politics, but just trying to position yourself to not hurt feelings and not be vulnerable and having your feelings hurt. And so the best ideas often never surface.
Let's call it ego ticks.
It's very true.
Hey, Mark, Emma says that sometimes you're scared of failing or looking incapable compared to other people around you.
Yeah, and I think these are all the areas that we're going to tackle in building this culture is all these things we're talking about are the things we've got to overcome. We can't be afraid to speak up. We can't be afraid to be shot down. I can personally tell you, oh my gosh, I mean, because most people know I don't sleep much. So I lay in bed and my head just spins. And by the time I get to work, I mean, there'll be days where my lava lamp is just rolling. Chief Myers walks in and I mean, he instantly, or Chief Earl, they can instantly see that I've been here for several hours and they know something's coming. And by the time I spit out the idea that I've slept on all night, they'll just walk it back. Chief Hurst is amazing at saying, I think we need to think about this. We can't roll this out right now. Let's have another night of rest before we pull the trigger because it's just how my brain works. And if I didn't share those ideas, I don't know if we would have accomplished the things that we have over the past year, because as crazy as some of the things that I've brought forward, they've been tweaked, they've been molded, they've been massaged through our leadership team or involvement from guys on the floor to just take some crazy idea that on the surface, there's some crazy things, but they actually panned out and benefited the organization.
Hey, Chief, this is Jason. Can I add to that just a little bit? Or at
Please.
least an option is one thing I appreciate, and I hope the rest of you realize is appreciate about Chief Sanderson is he's very dynamic in his ideas and presenting ideas and his thought processes. And one thing I learned about Chief Sanderson, I've worked with him for over 20 years. I've worked with him when he was here before as well. But one thing I didn't realize till he come back is that he's kind of a rocker, and he likes AC/DC. He likes some of the metal music, which is a lot of what I like as well. And so one thing that I was following up on one of my favorite bands, and if you guys know who Aerosmith is one of those longtime 80s, started out as one of those 80s big hair bands, right? And they're kind of rockers, but I was kind of following up on reading a story about them and how their creative process worked. And when I learned what their creative process is, which is when they were being interviewed by a book author, he was asking Steven Tyler, how do they come up with some of these great songs? And he says, well, Steven Tyler responds, well, we don't always come up with great songs. And he says, our process is once a week, we meet together as a band and we come together with the heading of just dare to suck. And the author is looking at him like, dare to suck. And he says, what exactly does that mean? And Steven Tyler goes on to explain, he says, it is just exactly what it means. He says, there is no bad idea. He says, come to the table with any idea that you have. And 9 out of 10 times, yeah, it'll probably be the worst idea that was presented at the table, dang near embarrassing that idea was even brought up. But the 1 out of 10 times you come out with songs like Walk This Way, #1 hits that we've been listening to for the last 30 years, right? And so that's kind of what I took to heart with that as far as ideas, because I used to be the type of person that was fairly reserved and still am in many respects, but I didn't bring ideas to the table years ago because I felt like that they were terrible ideas, one, and I didn't want to get shut down with a bad idea. But ever since, I've kind of been working with Chief Sanderson and recognizing that it's okay to bring ideas regardless if they're good or they're bad, and also kind of listening to the process that Aerosmith goes through. I actually challenged myself to come to the table with the worst possible idea I could probably think of, because you know what? Part of that process, we're going to come up with something that works pretty dang good, and it's going to work for our organization. And so that's kind of how walking into different brainstorming meetings, we kind of approach things. And as a leadership staff, we kind of have that unique dynamic that we can work really well together, having the understanding that all ideas are on the table, and it's okay to throw out the ones that might not quite work. So anyways, that's what I've shared.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate the example. And I love Aerosmith too. So AC/DC and Aerosmith, the two concerts I've been to in my whole life. So before we move on, I just want you all to just think, which group are you part of? Do you add to the sum or do you take away from the sum? And I think as we internalize that question, we have the ability to be different. We have the ability to add more, or we have the ability to be different in a number of different ways. And so I appreciate the comments. This is now, hopefully we'll get into the meat of this first section. All that was really introduction to the book, but talking about the culture code, group culture is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. The culture code book, it took 4 years of visiting and researching, which they said 8 of the world's most successful groups, which included special ops, military units, inner city schools, a professional basketball team, movie studios, and several other places that they mentioned. The result found that their cultures were created by a specific set of skills. They were all rolled into 3 basic concepts, and the concept we're going to cover for the remaining time we have is part one is it's going to be the things that we'll go over. I'm hoping that Carrie will give me the opportunity to cover 2 and 3 because it just completes this book. It's going to provide us a simple but powerful method for people just like us to create and perform far beyond our individual efforts. And so with that, let's jump into building safety. And the first part, the good apples. I'm going to ask each one of you, which apple are you? Are you the good apple? Or are you the bad apple? And I don't expect anybody to say I'm the bad apple. However, I've been the bad apple in a lot of different circumstances in my own life, in organizations, and the current leadership in the fire department remember me as a firefighter paramedic, where the approaches that I took and the goals, the things that I tried to accomplish, I just chose a different path. I chose a less productive, less positive approach. And I learned that if I really truly wanted to influence an organization, I had to change me. I had to change the way I delivered the message or the way I tried to accomplish the task. And so they have this bad apple experiment, as noted in the book. And the mission of this bad apple experiment was to sabotage the group's performance. So within multiple groups, one person was injected into the group, unknowing to the group, with the sole purpose of being one of the following. And the book outlines these as the jerk, which was an aggressive, defiant deviant, the slacker, a withholder of effort, or the downer, the depressive Eeyore type. And in almost every group, the behaviors reduced the quality of the group's performance by 30 to 40%. And when you think about that, 30 to 40%, that's a huge number that if there is a bad apple within our organization, within our individual departments, 30, 40% is a huge number to overcome. What this experiment found was the good apple. So taking all this negative talk about bad apple and changed it into positive, there was a good apple. And there was one specific group that no matter what the bad apple tried to do, how he tried to derail the information, it was countered by this one individual in the group. The groups were studied and the observations found that regardless of the bad apple's efforts, through body language, through laughing, smiling, changing the tone of the room, it provided an environment that diffused the group and removed the danger that the jerk had just created. This was a positive approach that allowed for members of the group to open up and share ideas. It basically made the room a safe environment. And that's our goal. And that's even some of the things we've talked about today is nobody wants to go out there and bring up an idea or make a comment if the room isn't safe. And so that's the whole topic we're discussing now is this building safety. So does anybody have any good examples of a good apple? I don't want the bad examples. There are a number of bad examples that we could all bring up, but I want to focus on the positive within the city, the positive within our own employees. And I'm just asking you to please share some examples.
So Mark, I have one that's, excuse me, really timely. A couple of days ago, we met with what we thought was just going to be one individual in a neighborhood who was having some public safety concerns. And we ended up having, 15 or 16 very emotionally charged, upset neighbors show up at this meeting. And one of the prosecutors in my office was there to talk about it, and his ability to remain calm to pivot when, when the whole idea of what this meeting was going to be and what it actually ended up being changed. He was just able to spend time listening to these people, understanding their concerns, and then on top of that, spending even more time trying to educate them about the criminal justice system. It was just really fascinating to watch him take a very emotionally charged and accusatory situation and transform it into a more collaborative and educational meeting. And it ended up, it was amazing. Those people walked away feeling like they had been heard and feeling like they were understood and we cared about them. It was just really fascinating to watch. He did a fantastic job.
That's a perfect example, and thank goodness, right? Because for all of those citizens that just had a positive experience, they'll appreciate that. I mean, that drives the culture. That will be talked about versus leaving super frustrated. And next week in council meeting, we end up with 200 people that weren't involved, but have heard about it and now are coming to complain. So thanks for sharing, Heather. Anyone else?
Mark, not necessarily an example, but from the book, what I really liked was the good apple. He was quick to point out, or they were quick to point out in the study that like the good apple wasn't necessarily the person with the most skills or the most qualification or the best at like, the leader of the group or anything. It was just the one that could like be inclusive and positive and make, like you're saying before, make everyone feel safe, so that the group could work well together and not be brought down by the bad apple. And so they deflected all of that, negative energy, I guess, and still made it a very productive environment that was open to ideas and, progressing.
Yeah, thank you. I found it interesting that the bad apple being set up and knowing he was going in, he was almost frustrated because he could not, no matter what he did, impact that group. And it's just, like you said, the one employee that isn't the leader that has the ability to make a difference. And that's honestly each one of us in our own departments. Can't discount any single one of our employees.
I have a quick experience I want to share. I haven't been at Orem very long, so I don't have a lot of experiences here with the city. But when I was at BYU working on my grad program, we had a situation where a girl committed suicide in the Tanner building. And she actually jumped from the 4th floor and landed on the 1st floor in front of a lot of my classmates. And this isn't a bad apple in like a person, but a situation that became very, very hard for a lot of students to deal with. And we had one professor in particular who, when we had class the next day, was like, hey, let's talk about this. Completely derailed their entire presentation, wasn't focused on like getting through the semester or anything like that, but was like, we spent an hour of our class just really processing what had happened. And it made a huge difference for a lot of the students just to be able to have that safe space that they could talk about what they had seen, what they were experiencing, what they were feeling. And there were definitely other professors that like acknowledged that this is hard, but this one particular professor was like, no, let's like break down these walls, these barriers. And it definitely changed the tone of that class for the rest of the semester, because we all felt like we could really approach that professor and talk to them about absolutely anything. And so I think it's important to, when you think about like the good apples and the bad apples, it may not necessarily be that there is a person that is creating turmoil in the organization, but there are circumstances and situations that are hard. And a good apple is the kind of person that is going to take whatever turmoil may be happening and can create that safety where everyone feels that they are heard and able to participate.
Yeah, thank you. That's a perfect example. And I hope that for the professor's sake, if you haven't, you should reach out, because obviously he's impacted you, he impacted the students. And I think that would be amazing opportunity to share with him the difference that he made in your life and the students he continues to work with. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, for sure. And the professor was a girl, by the way.
Yes, reach out to her.
Yeah. But yeah, I will.
Hey, Chief, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a couple technical difficulties, but this is Lon Myers. If you guys, I'm on my phone now, the computer mic wasn't working, but talking about these bad apples, I just had a thought that occurred that we don't, as a city, we don't hire bad apples, right? I mean, that's not what we're in the business to do, at least on the fire department. And I've met our workers across all of the departments of the city, and they're all good people. And sometimes I think, a transition can take place where we hire a good apple, and then sometimes, things change. And sometimes I believe we as supervisors need to find out what is going on in their life that has swayed them, that has brought in perhaps some negativity, because they weren't a bad apple always, right? I mean, these are solid individuals, and what's going on in their life, and what can I do as a supervisor, as a coworker, to really kind of to investigate, influence, and perhaps mitigate what's going on. What do you think of that, Chief? What do you think? Do we hire bad apples or not?
No, I think you're exactly right. I can't imagine a single one of the directors, hiring managers, anybody that has that ability to hire would ever hire the bad apple. But you're exactly right. And I kind of look to it as it's a leadership quality that we're creating that safety for that employee that is struggling, that we identify they're having issues. We're reaching out, creating that safe space because something's changed. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing the example.
Yeah.
I'm gonna provide this list. It's from the book. This is a list of consistent interactions that have been identified that help create safe connections. And I actually, if you look at number 3, the physical touch, it's in the book. I just made a note that the hugs need to be HR friendly, approved only by Carrie. So, but the rest of it, I mean, when you look through these, you can put names of members in your department or in the organization that you could assign to each one of these. We all have the ability to look at this list and identify the ones we're good at, but we also should look at the ones that maybe we need to improve on. And I can give an example before I turn to you guys, looking for additional examples that, I mean, I like to throw in the short, energetic exchanges. On the flip side, all the fire guys listening, they're going to be like, well, that's not you because you talk a lot. And so I have to just quantify that. Lots of short, energetic changes comes when it's a difficult situation. I feel like I'm the person in the room that tries to, I don't know, I think it's just my personality. I've always done it. I've always acted that way. I've always tried to lighten the situation so that it wasn't until this book that I realized that maybe it was my way of creating a safe space. I think that's what I appreciate about this book so much is the little things that I've done throughout my leadership experiences, or even just being as an employee. I've finally been able to put, because of this book, a title to some of the things that I do. And so on the flip side, the thing that I probably have the most to work on is few interruptions. And even as recent as our executive leadership meeting this week, I find myself wanting to weigh in and give my opinion and speak up. And I'm working really hard and trying really hard to be that attentive listener and wait until somebody's finished. And I just realized as preparing for this presentation that, yeah, I caught myself a couple of times trying to speak up so that I could get my words in. And so I know that that's an area that I have focused that I can help improve so that I can create a better safety environment, even just within our executive leadership team. So how about you guys? I mean, examples of use of these interactions and how do they apply to each of you? Come on, I know that I can see your names and I can put your names on some of these. So how have you developed these interactions? How have you personalized these interactions to create safe environments in your circles of influence? How do you like that one, Jason? That was for you.
Love it.
Mark, this is Bryce from Recreation. And I was just thinking of the physical change of offices that our department has undergone in the last couple of years as we transition to the new Family Fitness Center, and even from sort of two separate divisions, all now being in the same admin office. I think just that, like, the opportunity for these things, as opposed to just coming together for the, very official meetings or official things where there is an agenda and we're moving through it. I've seen this repeatedly, just in the couple of months since the facility's been open, and you can see the dividends already being paid because you have opportunities for the levels of mixing specifically. You try to really flatten and break down the barriers between different divisions and everything like that. So I think we've all had that similar opportunity coming out of COVID, where we have had more opportunities to develop and redevelop these skills. And even if we, took some time off because of the pandemic, or, I think we all have a really unique opportunity right now to practice this and recommit to doing this to help build that safety that we have on our teams.
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. I appreciate that.
Hey, Mark, as I was looking through this list of things that I really appreciate to feel safe in an environment, I really appreciate when I'm having a discussion with someone and we each have each other's full attention, and there's no distractions of checking your phone or being on your computer, and it's just eye contact, and I know that they're listening to everything that I'm saying and vice versa. I think that respect there really builds a lot of safety.
Yeah, and thanks, Carrie. Along this same list, high levels of mixing. Everyone talks. I mean, there's like 60 people on this, 61 actually. That creates safety. I mean, even just the right now experience of me presenting to all of you, the participation, which I so appreciate. If I didn't have any, it would not be a safe environment. So thank you for utilizing that specific bullet point and making me feel safe and having the conversation and leading the conversation. One additional thing I want to make looking at this list is these interactions create chemistry, and good chemistry creates positive results. And that's what we're looking for in each one of our organizations. So moving on, belonging cues are behaviors that create safe connections in groups. As you read through this slide and read these cues, think about the people you work with and what belonging cues they send. Proximity, eye contact, energy, mimicry, turn talking, attention, body language, vocal pitch, all of them that's listed there. Especially whether everyone else talks. That's a big one, like I just mentioned. But these all break down into three basic qualities of belonging cues that possess the following: And the number one is energy, which is investing in the exchange that is occurring. Individualization is treating the person as unique and valued. And future orientation. These are the three things listed in the book, but this future orientation sends a signal that the relationship will continue. The question that I guess I have to the leaders, employees, that needs to be answered is, are we creating a safe environment? Are we sending these cues that instantly picked up on by the people that surround us? Are there any of these that you guys can identify that you can spot on nail, give examples?
So Mark, I have actually received over the course of my legal career a lot of good advice on my body language. Early on in my career, I was in a mediation, and when I would get frustrated, and I didn't realize that I would do this, but when I would get frustrated with the other side or disagree with a point, I would push myself away from the table. And I didn't even realize that I was doing it. But there was another attorney in the mediation with me, and afterwards they said, you know, when you do that, it signals to the other side that you're done listening and you're done working with them, and that's counterproductive. And it's funny, that's always stuck with me. And so when I'm in meetings or I'm in a situation where there's conflict, I really try to stay aware of my body language, because I think body language says more about what you're actually thinking than the words that are coming out of your mouth in a lot of situations.
I absolutely agree. 100%. And those, I mean, those are the cues that we're talking about that instantly we can pick up. And I'm excited for the next controversial conversation that we bring up in exec staff to watch and see if you push away, because I'm like, oh, she's done. It's over.
You know, Mark and Heather, I don't feel bad, Heather. I do something similar, and I've really tried hard to catch myself. But a lot of times when I find myself having a very difficult, high emotion conversation with someone, whether that's a resident or an employee or one particular topic, I fold my arms. And come to find out, as I've researched it a little bit, the topic of body language, that's my own self-defense mechanism to it's like putting up the force field, you know, to protect myself and or to not be movable in my opinion. And so I have to catch myself and unfold my arms and just try to have a more relaxed, more open approach. But it is something that you do it without knowing you're doing it until you're right in the middle of it. You're like, oh my gosh, I just did it again. So don't feel bad.
Oh, it's so interesting, Jason, because sometimes I'm in the same boat and I watch people and somebody folds their arms, I'll fold my arms. I mean, it's, yeah, we mimic each other, but sometimes folding your arms is just the most comfortable position to sit in or stand in. But until you're cueing in on, you can tell that the person you're having the conversation with just backed off. Well, was that because of that standoffish, protected, I'm folding my arms position? And it's for each one of us in all of our roles and all of our conversations to assure that we're sending the right cues, that we're creating a safe environment.
Hey, Mark, this is Shar. I was just going to mention that I think it's good that, you know, Heather and Jason either came to awareness of those particular habits, whether it was through conversations with supervisors or coworkers or just self-awareness. But sometimes we all need to kind of evaluate this particular area and we may have to do some, question or coaching with some of our staff. I think we've all been in a meeting where somebody lets off a big sigh and you take it as something of boredom, or they're tired, or not having the conversation as well as you'd think they would. And then other times, it might be something that somebody just does and they didn't even realize it. I talked to someone once who would sigh in our conversations, and I had to ask. I said, I just feel like this is just coming full disgust right at me. And the person was like, oh no, I didn't even realize I did that. So sometimes we need to do self-awareness, and maybe if we're having a particular reaction to someone else, maybe we have a conversation with them before we just completely nuke the relationship.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else on belonging cues?
Hey, Mark, I thought from this quote that you have up on the screen right now, the importance of noticing whether or not everyone talks in the group. I think that is a really big cue on whether or not everyone feels safe and belonging in the group. If they're willing to offer up during conversations, ideas, or direction that they feel like would be a good way for the team to go, then they feel safe in the group. And if you have someone in your team that sits back and doesn't really participate a lot, you as the supervisor need to take that opportunity to find out what it is you can do to help them feel more safe and belonging in the group, so that they're willing to help share with the team.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. I feel like I'm really lucky. I think our leadership team, like Chief Earl expressed, we work really good together. We probably take that whole let everyone in the group or everyone talking to each other to the extreme. But in meetings with our leadership team, when I've brought an idea forward and they don't say something, I know we have a problem. That's my key that, okay, we're now no longer safe here. Something feels different.
Good.
And so yeah, I appreciate everyone in the group. And part of being safe is sharing your opinion. And when other team members don't, that's when you question, okay, wait, am I off in left base? It's not, you ask yourself the question is, how far off are you when people aren't participating? So the next part of this book is it's the $1 billion day when nothing happened. And there was this challenge developed early before the internet really took off, where both Overture, Google, these internet-based companies, and there was no question that Overture had the advantage. They had the employees, they had the networks, they had the resources, and Google, little teeny company at the time, the challenge was to develop an internet search engine that connects all internet users. Well, obviously, we're on Google right now. We all know who won that challenge. But interesting from the book, how this whole process took place was the Google founder, Larry Page, pinned a note in the company's kitchen that read, "These ads suck." And how this Google came about, an employee saw the note and recalled dealing with a similar project previously. He'd just gone into the break room basically to make himself a cup of coffee, read the details, saw this, because this was really, it was highly unusual for Larry to post a note like this. The employee went back to his desk, started to work on solving the problem that was really not his problem. It wasn't his work focus. I mean, this guy had his own work to do, much like many of us. This employee actually came to work the next day, which happened to be a Saturday, worked for a few hours, continued to just try to fix this problem because of this sticky note. He actually, the following day, Sunday, had dinner with his family, put his kids to bed, and then went back to work Sunday night. And book describes that he worked all through the night. And finally, at 5:05 on Monday morning, he sent out an email outlining the proposed fix to these ads suck. This solution, this work ethic, this process that he went through, I mean, obviously put Google on the map, and beat Overture to the punch in developing the software. And I mean, they're huge today. The following year, after implementing the fixes, Google's profits went from $6 million to $99 million. I mean, I can't even imagine what they are now, but what this idea supports is just like the kindergartners jumping in and just going to work, figuring it out, fixing the problem, because there was really no plan developed. The employee just jumped in to fix the task. And so if I just posed the question, or I think in my own head, if Assistant Fire Chief Myers, whose primary responsibilities is our emergency medical services, was to walk into the fire station and post a note on the kitchen board that says, "Our patient care sucks," what would our team do? I mean, so the question to each one of you, looking internally at your groups, what would your employees do? Would they jump in and fix the issue? I mean, much like the Google employee. What's your guys' thoughts?
I would feel bad if that was hanging anywhere in my center, and specifically speaking about working here or being here. If I had seen something like that, obviously I would start going around or even start with, please be more specific. Like, I want to have a conversation about this. Help me understand why and how we can change it.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. I mean, when you compare, I mean, my example of Chief Myers walking into the fire station, specifically with our patient care sucks, it's as main of a component as the search engine for Google. It's what Google does. Emergency medical services is what the fire department does. And so I'm confident in our staff, just like you said, Gina, that we would have team members that would jump in, identify the problem, figure out what aspects of our care, be more specific, and change the culture, which then puts Orem Fire Department on the map, our patient care on the map, our emergency medical services. There's no question should be leading Utah's EMS when it comes to the care we provide, because we have that caliber of employee. What about it? What about in your guys' departments? Do you have any specific examples where maybe someone's already taken on this type of challenge? As leaders, we've identified faults in our system or programs we could do better. So what are some examples that have already been solved within your own departments?
Mark, I don't think I have a specific example, but I had 3 takeaways from this story because this one really hit me when I read the book. One, that the leadership was willing to say this isn't working, which shows, I think, some vulnerability on their part. And I know that's the next part of the book, but some ability to say this is a safe place to say, hey, this isn't working. 2, that the employee, even though it wasn't his area, was like, there was a culture there that was like, everybody has a say in this. Everybody can add to the solution. Everybody can help. And so I liked that culture element of it. And then the third part was the end of the story where the author went to talk to him about what he did. And the guy was like, what did I do? I don't remember that. Or he's like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. There was like no ego about what he did. No need for the recognition, just kind of, he went back to work and did what he did. And I thought all 3 of those are great takeaways for me.
Yeah, it's crazy. $93 million difference. And the guy barely even recalls the solution that he contributed. It's amazing. Along this, within this same section, 2 scenarios, and I've labeled it rain at the train station. So you're standing in the rain at the train station. A stranger approaches and politely says, "Can I borrow your cell phone?" Well, I think, I don't know. Would I give him my cell phone? Scenario 2, you're standing in the rain at the train station. A stranger approaches and politely says, "I'm so sorry about the rain. Can I borrow your cell phone?" Now, obviously, there's not much difference in these 2 questions. Who are you more likely to give your cell phone to and why? Are there a different, is there a separation in these 2 for any of you?
Absolutely, there is. The more personal response, and the other one kind of almost feels demanding, or as if they deserve it. And the other one was like commiserating with you about something that was unpleasant, and then asking for a favor.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. Other comments?
That's funny. When I hear like, "I'm so sorry about the rain," I'm like, that person didn't do the rain. Like they have nothing to apologize for. So like the second one to me was almost like a little more uncomfortable of like, you don't control the weather. You don't have to apologize for that.
Yeah, interesting perspective.
Mark, this is Shirley. I'd almost say that the second one was more comfortable to me because they're kind of giving me a hint as to why they want to use my cell phone. I took it as the reason they want the cell phone has something to do with the rain. So my indication would be more to allow the second one to use my phone.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing, Shirley. So basically, the Harvard Business School performed this exact experiment. The second scenario caused a response, a return rate of a jump in that rate to 422%. And they have identified the 6 words, "I'm so sorry about the rain." They correlated that into transforming people's behavior, which sent an unmistakable signal that this is a safe place to connect. And so I thought that was interesting that, yeah, you're apologizing for something you have no control over, but it sends that cue that it's a safe environment. And that 422% is huge in the number of people that decided to give their phone up to that person just based on that safe environment. And I mean, we each have the ability within our own conversations and are responsible to make sure that the message we're sending is developing that safe environment. Otherwise, we're just stuck. And so safety allows us to do a lot of things.
Hey, Mark.
Hillary.
Go ahead.
One of the things that was talked about often at my last employment was things don't have to be broken to make them better. And that kind of ties in with the last slide in this story as well, because there's really nothing wrong with just asking someone, "Can I borrow your cell phone?" But that small change can create such an impactful result. And I think often in employment or different places of work, the culture can become a normal and a familiar thing, and people get comfortable and used to something and the way things are, the way things have always been. And even though they may be working, they don't necessarily work as well as they potentially could. And so it's just a thought that I had.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Another thing with that scenario too, that stranger that approached in the rain, he had basically one chance to establish a rapport and try and build a little bit of a relationship of trust. And I believe he did that with apologizing for the rain. We, on the other hand, as supervisors, I believe we have multiple opportunities to try and establish that relationship with our, with the people and those around us, our subordinates. And so, how we interact, how we deposit those emotional credits with them, I believe earns the respect. And to the point of, walking into the fire station and just posting that note on the refrigerator and telling them that their patient care sucks. I think a lot of it has to do with how their response has to do with, who left that note. Is the person that left that note, is he culpable in this at all? Is he perceived to have vulnerabilities like them? Has he created a safe environment in the relationship between them and that supervisor? And so I think a lot of that has to do with with the rapport that has been established and the credibility that supervisor has with his subordinates.
Yeah, thanks, Lon.
Hey, Chief, I just, one more thing on this one is, if you're looking at scenario one, I'd be more apt to go with scenario one, just because on two, if we're approaching those people in person, I'm looking at other things, body language and conditions and rain. And for me, I guess maybe it's based on my personality, but I'd be more suspicious of the person on scenario two by starting a report. I'm so sorry about the rain. And like the previous comment, okay, well, you don't control the weather, so why are you sorry about the rain? And why do you want to borrow my phone? And so my wife always tells me, she says, you're really quiet, but you speak volumes with your body language. And so I pay a lot of attention to body language and my body language. And so I think that applies into whatever scenario I'm going to pick, is ensuring and staying conscious of what my body language is responding back, or watching the person responding to me, because that's going to help with trying to understand the condition or the situation that the person is in that's asking to borrow my phone, right?
Yeah, I totally agree that words on the surface, obviously, there's a little more substance to it. So it's easy to say it's creating a safe environment, but you're exactly right, Lon and Chief Earl, that body language, given the scenario, we're all going to interpret, we're all going to read different cues. And so this was just one aspect of a cue that's being sent. However, there's so many different cues that we would all pick up on. The whole objective is just making sure that we're creating a safe environment. We're more likely to interact with individuals when we're creating that safe environment. This 1 hour experiment, I had to bring this into the conversation because it so ties into belonging cues. And it also, I feel like, is something that we could currently bring into Orem City or into our own individual departments. This experiment occurred in India at a highly successful call center. The call center was organized and really highly efficient. The company was considered a great workplace. They had good benefits, great wages. They provided great food, transportation, and a number of different social activities for their employees. The issue the call center was having was a yearly average employee turnover rate of 50 to 70%. And I can't even imagine what Carrie would do if we were turning over 50 to 70% of our employees. It'd be terrible. Employees were leaving for all of the usual reasons. However, there were reasons the company could not articulate, and that's why they pulled together this 1 hour experiment. They did all of the things first, just like I feel like our administration would do, or within our own individual departments. We're going to boost salaries if we can. We're going to add perks where we can. We're going to brag about our department or our company, just like they did with this call center in India, about being the best employee. We're just going to do all these same things, but it just didn't work. And so the experiment was several hundred new employees were divided into two groups. Group one, standard new hire training was completed, along with one additional hour where the focus was all about the company's identity. The training included discussions about the company's success. They actually were able to meet one of the star performers in the organization and then answered questions about the employees' first impressions regarding the company. At the end of that training for group one, each employee was provided a fleece sweatshirt embroidered with the company's name. Now you look at group two, received the same standard training plus the additional hour, focused not only on the company, but on the employee. Personal questions were asked related to the employee, their feelings of success and satisfaction in the workplace. They were asked about their happiest and best times the employee had experienced in their performance at work. The group members were asked to consider what special skills they might bring to a situation in the event their team was lost at sea. At the end of this training, group two, they were given the same fleece sweatshirt. However, the employee's name was embroidered alongside the company's name. The results were actually shocking to the company, which they were anticipating minimal differences. However, the new employee group two were 250% more likely to still be employed than the members of group one, which is huge. I mean, we talk turnover all the time with our city councils and just within our own departments, and that's the last thing we want to do. And so belonging cues, what belonging cues do you guys feel like were changed from group one to group two? What's the differences? Besides their name being embroidered? I mean, what's the difference in the training that's being provided?
Mark, I think it helped the employees identify their role or them as a piece of the greater puzzle, their contribution, basically.
Yeah. Someone else had a comment.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what Jason said, there's a difference between feeling like you're a cog in the machine and feeling like you're an important part of the machine, like you as an individual. And if things are just company focused, then just anyone can do this job. They just need someone here to answer the phones or move the papers or whatever. Versus when you're employee focused, then that person feels like they personally are making a difference to the company. And then it's not just anyone can sit in the seat or do what they do, but that individual needs to be there.
Yeah, so what the book describes, thank you for those comments. What the book describes is group one received 0 signals that reduced the interpersonal distance between themselves and the company, whereas group two received a steady stream of individualized, future-oriented belonging cues. And so what is it that we can do different, whether it's city, HR, with new employees, whether that's our own individual departments, what can we do different with our new hires that they fill these belonging cues? What are some of the belonging cues that we could throw at them? What do we change? What do we do different? Because you think about our orientation, you think about the new employees you bring into your groups, how are they treated? And what could we do different based off of today's discussion that make them feel more valued, more important, more, empowered, belonging?
Hey, Chief, this is Sean. One thing I think that the fire service has had to overcome in recent years is we had this boot mentality where somebody had to earn their acceptance. And I think that's one thing that we're working toward is acceptance first, and then we work with them. But they don't have to gain that acceptance. They're accepted the day they show up. And in the fire service in particular, in decades past, that wasn't the case. You were a boot, you were a rookie for your first year and you were treated differently. And I know that's one thing with our culture that we've had to remedy in recent years.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sean. That's a really good example.
I have to say too, Chief Sanderson, that when I came on to work as the administrator in the fire department, I came from somewhere that was very like, stay within your lane, that's not your job. And so I was a little bit gun shy about contributing in some of the meetings and things like that. But I felt very valued and opinions have been very heard. And, you know, it's actually fostered more of a desire to contribute when I feel like I have a contribution to make or some input. And so I think just that difference of having a welcome, open, like, no, I don't work, like my boots are on the ground, my boots are in the office, but I might have some insight that might provide value to you guys from a different perspective. And you've always, you know, you and the leadership team have always made me feel like those opinions are valued. So that's been a really big deal for me here.
Thanks for sharing.
Mark, I have a experience that's similar in terms of being really young and being new to the team and being asked for my opinions. And it stuck with me all these years that my supervisor, when I first kind of came on in a more significant role at the library, I was 19. I was still really fresh and young. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, or at least that's the way I felt. But I got pulled into my supervisor's office and she said, you know, I want your opinions on what we could do differently or better because you have fresh eyes. You're coming at this, you know, into an established group, then we are just used to the way things are. But is there anything that you've seen or that you want to bring up? And she kind of just opened up the conversation. And that, like I said, has stuck with me all these years, that I felt like that meant that I was really part of the team and she valued my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for that example. Yeah, that's a good leader. Let's talk about how to build belonging. In this section, they really, I mean, one of the parts I pulled out was the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, Coach Popovich. He's used as an example of developing and maintaining one of the best basketball teams ever. I mean, if you like the Spurs, then more power to you. They were never my team, but they always performed. They beat the Jazz every damn time. I swear I went to a game. And so, yeah, there were words that were used in the book to describe Coach Popovich. He was hardcore. He was old school. He's a bulldog. He's volcanic. And they described him being an Air Force Academy graduate. And for me, if you ever watch their games, I've always felt like he was the biggest jerk on the planet. I didn't like him. I mean, I don't know how many times he got ejected. He was always screaming at somebody. That's why I love the pitcher. However, until I got into this book and understood him as a person and his leadership, his building belonging, I mean, I got a totally different respect for this guy, this coach. What is it that he did for the players or this on the Spurs? I mean, basically he filled their cup. And what does that mean? Well, the two things that I pulled out that were the most important aspects of his leadership was, one, he would provide the truth to his players and he never held back. He didn't spare their feelings and he just provided you magical feedback. And it even said sometimes it was nose to nose, but I could see that in his personality. He's that type of guy. The second thing was he loved the players to death, which you would have never picked that up in watching 4 quarters of a basketball game. The thing that I found the most interesting was just the talks about the dinners, the wine, that they drank together, traveling together, the social events. It was such a huge priority of his that he built this belonging. Yeah, he would tell you, he would provide this magical feedback, but then that other aspect on the personal side is loving the employees to death, but in his case, loving the players to death. I've worked for organizations where the common theme is that you're the boss. You can't be friends, you can't socialize. It's all about the business. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts regarding the relationship that leaders can have with their staff or with, subordinate employees? What do you guys think?
Have you brought up that like we're in a meeting?
I can tell you that I'm one that feels like I have the ability to be a better boss, be a better leader, be a better supervisor if I have a personal relationship with the employee. And I don't know why I always fall back to discipline when I talk about this. It's much easier for me to discipline an employee who's a friend that I associate outside of work with. And I think that's because I have that safe environment. I have the ability and develop the relationship to where when an employee has an issue, makes an error, violates a policy, or is contributing negatively because of my personal relationship and a friendship and a social relationship, I feel like I can discipline them, deal with the situation, and move on and still maintain that friendship. What do you guys think? What are your experiences? And I'm not feeling very safe right now, so speak up.
So Mark, I actually have a question for you and for the group, because this is something that I've thought about. I want to have personal relationships and get to know them and invest in them, as like, I want to know about how they're doing, how their family's doing, things they're struggling with, things that they're celebrating. I want to know all of those things. Spending time with them in like a social kind of situation outside of work, though, I really worry that like I wouldn't be able to do that equitably across the board with every employee. And I don't ever want anyone to feel like there's like favoritism going on just because there's only so many hours in every day. Right. And so where's the balance, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. And obviously other people please weigh in, but for me specifically, I don't socialize with every member of the fire department away from work. There are members of the fire department that I vacation with, that I travel with. They're leaders, they're just employees, or paramedics, or firefighters. I guess I've just never looked at it as favoritism, and I think you'd have to ask the members of the department if that favoritism was felt. It could easily be developed and be perceived that way. I think it then falls on us as leaders to maintain that consistency in how we deal with individuals and their problems. And I mean, leadership failure number one is the lack of consistency. So I think I've overcome that appearance of favoritism just by maintaining accountability across the board, setting expectations. And I feel like when employees see me hold my friends accountable, that fixes that perceived favoritism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
The takeaway because we're gonna run out of time really quick. I only have a couple of slides left, but the takeaway from this with magical feedback is we need to be providing magical feedback to our employees. It's how we're going to build the safety within our own culture. Being able to say the hard things that make a difference. And yeah, they're uncomfortable and it's hard to do, but the more we do it, the easier it gets and the more impactful it will be. And so that would be my challenge moving forward, is have magical feedback with your employees. Really quickly, I want to talk about the CEO.
Hey, Chief.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Pearson. I was just going to say in regards to that last question about how you connect with each person, I don't think you have to. You just have to jump on the opportunities that present themselves. You're never going to relate to everybody or connect with everybody. But if you take the opportunity, like you and I go for runs together because we both like to run, that doesn't mean you go run with everybody. You just, that's the activity that you jump on as far as the opportunity goes. So you just take those opportunities as they present, and the rest of them just kind of see that example. And if they want to have that kind of relationship, then they'll find opportunities or invites to where you can make that connection.
You know, that's fair. And I think to that same point, and you're the perfect example to answer to that, where we run outside of work. I don't think there's any question that if you needed to have magical feedback, that it would be shared. And so I appreciate you just bringing that forward. So I'm not quite sure how to say the CEO of Zappo's last name. But the thing that I love that he brings into design, how to design for belonging, is he uses this collisions, which are, from his perspective, the key driver of creativity, community, and cohesiveness. They're the lifeblood of any organization. The thing that I liked was that he set a personal goal of having 1,000 collisionable hours per year. A couple things that he did to accomplish this was that he closed the entrance, a side entrance to Zappos headquarters, which funneled all the employees through a single entrance, thus creating these collisionable experiences that he felt so valuable. He was also known to rearrange furniture at social functions, which forced interactions between people, which are these collisions I'm talking about. One person also commented that he was the first billionaire to ever remove furniture, which I thought was interesting. What can we do within our own workflows to create these collisions? Do you guys feel that they're important in the success of belonging? Everybody's, I'm sure, getting tired, and I know we're running out of time. So I think I love it because I think these collisions are exactly something that our leadership team is doing. We have scheduled lunch meetings where we meet with a crew every week. So over the course of the quarter, we've met with every single platoon and fire station crew. I think those are the type of collisions that I think will create belonging in the organization. But I also have to mention this greenhouse atmosphere. The CEO, he compared his process to a greenhouse. And I quote, this is what he said: in some greenhouses, the leader plays the role of the plant that every plant aspires to. But he says, that's not me. I'm not the plant that everyone wants to aspire to be. My job is to architect the greenhouse, which I thought was fascinating. That this kind of thought process describes the processes in which he's created the belonging within his organization. Build the greenhouse and create collisions. As leaders, we don't want to be that plant. That's not our job. That's not what we've been hired to do. When you look at the difference this guy made for Zappos in 2002, from 32 million to, I don't know the year they were sold to Amazon with 1,500 employees, but revenues of $2 billion. Those are huge increases. The note in the book I thought was the most interesting is that they indicated it was easier to get into Harvard than to acquire a job at Zappos based on the competition, based on the environment, the greenhouse, these collisions, the atmosphere that was created. And so, I mean, I want to challenge everyone to not be the plant, but let's be the greenhouse. Whether you're the leader or not, create this atmosphere that yeah, we've got hundreds of people banging down our door that want to work here based off of the culture. You guys have comments about this slide? I have 2 left and we'll wrap it all up.
Hey, Mark, if you don't mind, I just wanted to make mention of what you've been able to do in your department in the last year since you came in. I think that turnover has pretty much come to a standstill. When we did have an open positions, we had lots of lateral people apply to come over here because not only the pay structure was fixed, but because the culture here was different with you as their leader, and they wanted to be part of this new culture that was being built. So I think that that speaks exactly to what Zappos did as well, is that what you're doing to your department right now.
Well, thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. And I think we are in a really good place. And it's because of our leadership. It's because of the quality of employee that we have within the department. And I think the atmosphere we're creating, that people are safe. People, yeah, feel valued and are contributing to the organization. So I appreciate you sharing that. This last, I guess it's the last slide, but these are the ideas for action. And this is a list of things that I would love to provide a copy to you to post up that every single one of us can work on. In the book, it breaks down what every single one of these talk about. But as you read through them, we've touched bases on creating these safe environments. And these are just the tools that I think from the book provide us the opportunities. I guess, want to just, wrap it up. I hope through the discussion today that each one of us can take away a number of ideas or processes. And I just challenge you to look internally, use these tools we've talked about today to help build safety and drive our culture, because I definitely want to be part of an organization that is culture rich, that we can define, that employees live, that leaders create. And I just appreciate the time that I've been given to present this just last quote. Culture is a set of living relationships working towards a shared goal. It's not something you are, it's something you do. So let's go do it. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for facilitating that conversation, and training. A lot of great information that I know personally I've got a lot to chew on, and some definite self-awareness, things that I need to improve in my own life. So thanks again, Mark, for that. Once again, if you're interested and like to get a copy of this book, please contact Human Resources. And other than that, Carrie, if you don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and dismiss everyone. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in a month.
Thanks, everybody.